So that kind of innovative thinking started by a couple of people, and they've done it. And it's continuing, and fortunately, and hopefully will not be short-term like far too many programs are. And there's many other programs. A number of years ago, and I know some of these seem kind of simplistic in some ways because it doesn't change the whole system. But I think it was Ross who mentioned this to me. Some years ago, whatever government was in power, it doesn't matter, started a small recreation fund for children and youth to take piano lessons, play hockey, whatever. Well, I don't know about you, but I'd rather buy a kid a pair of skates than see a kid in the receiving home. I think that program apparently, according to Ross, who knows these things, has increased terrifically. And I think the people who've supported that really deserve a lot of credit. So there are a lot of small programs, small-ish programs, that make a significant difference. Now, I think things like soup kitchens and the food bank are really important resources in a transitional sense, but they are not solutions. And this is not to criticize in any way. I've worked at soup kitchens and certainly donated to the food bank. But I think we really have to look at them. And as we listen to Senator Siegel, I think when he talks about a form of annual income, why I can go to the grocery store and buy something when I want it, more or less. I want somebody to be able to do that. And so I think there are ways that we can look at these services as important and transitional, but as that. So there are things that, we need to, and so many people today have mentioned them, we could take action on. And let me just mention the first one I have here. I think we've heard from just about everybody, coordination, coordination, coordination. Let's not have, what did Vicki say, pie chart people? Divide it up into pieces, send here, send there, send everywhere. The judge mentioned this as well. You better have a good calendar because you're going to have appointments here, there, and where, everywhere. I have to tell you that's one of the things that hasn't changed in 40 years since I was involved in social work. But in the 1970s, 100 years ago, when I first started out, community development was kind of the rage. This is in bad old Ontario. And so I was in the community development stream of social work. And our work was really to work with individual, yes, but as a community. And I ended up being the head of a unit. Some of you who might be from Toronto would know Lawrence Heights, which is a large public housing complex. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we want a Lawrence Heights. But I'll tell you what we did do. I was then working for Children's Aid Society. A multi-service unit was developed with housing, children's aid, social assistance, and so on, in one small unit serving the community. So when a person came to the office, they didn't see, 5 people. They saw one, whoever was working with the person at the time. And we were able to provide them with a supportive environment because we had a daycare. We could provide housing. We could give counseling where that was needed. We could provide programs. A lot of them were single parents, as we've heard earlier. That's a large percentage of those receiving assistance. But we could provide programs of respite. We could, have a program where they come and get their hair done, sort of what happens here maybe once a month. But we could do cooking classes, make Christmas decorations. It might sound trite to some, but it really isn't, because it helps people feel better about themselves. And I think probably if there's any hallmark of the marginalized populations that we're speaking about is the low self-esteem. I think someone talked about when you bend down, no issue. And so we were able to really work on that. And it definitely saved money, if we're going to talk about the economic argument. And that was important, because we have to think of priorities. However, it worked for the people. Not everybody, but it worked for the majority of the people there. And it worked for us because we felt good. And, you know, if the caregivers aren't feeling good, it's a little hard for the people with whom they're working to feel good. So I think the message here today from everyone, certainly not just for me, is we have got to turn this on its head, get out of institutionalization, and find a way to do coordinated services. It's not that hard, and it can work. So many people today have said this. Either they've experienced it in their own life, or they just know it should be done. And so that would be my first action plea. How about a model? I'm big on starting small as opposed to starting big. Whenever you start big, the pieces start falling off, and, you know, too many people say, oh, you can't do that, or you can't do that, you can't do that. But why not a model? Just a few people here. A model that can really work. Maybe there are some. I mean, I have to admit that my lack of knowledge of all the programs in the system is very vast. But I don't know why then everybody mentioned it today. And I've heard this from people in the government. I've heard it from people who are recipients of service. It's a pretty common thing. So I really make the plea that this is something we could do now. We don't have to wait. It's just somebody with a little leadership to say, okay, we're going to start this little model. It's not hard. And make it work. So that's my first plea. I think it was Bill that mentioned this. Of course, as I say, being the last speaker, someone always steals your ideas. I think we need to have a real dialogue in a respectful, non-punitive way about the responsibility of the individual and the responsibility of the individual within society. It's a very tricky thing, because very often that conversation has not been a dialogue. It's been a one-way labeling, or in some ways kind of detrimental. And I'll give you one example. I am told by a number of people who should know that there are a number of children in this community, the territory, far too many, who miss 1 year out of 5 in school. We should be ashamed. But is that the government's responsibility? Is that the education system's responsibility? No, it's the parents' responsibility and the caregiver's responsibility. And so I think we have to begin to talk about that. And as I say, not in a punitive way, which is usually the way the conversation goes. And Bill talked, too, about rights and responsibilities. And I guess that's what I'm saying. Because you know what? When you have responsibilities, you feel like a real person. You don't just feel like someone who is taking. You're someone who also has some pride and I think really gets respect. It's a complicated conversation. I'm not even sure how we do it well. But I think it's one that we really should have. Also, in that same vein, would ask whether we provide opportunities for people who are maybe going through tough times to contribute. Or are they just, as someone said earlier, recipients of charity? And I think another message of today has really been that we all feel better when we feel we can contribute. And I think this involves business, citizens, it involves everybody. As I said earlier, it's a community with an excess of volunteers. We have lots of volunteers, and that's great. We don't have an excess, sorry.